Well, hello, everyone. It's Melissa Secord here from the Canadian Celiac Association, and I'm the executive director. And I'm really delighted as part of our In Conversation series and a combination chapter check-in with Christa Dubesky from our Manitoba chapter. Welcome, Christa.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, for having me.
We're just so delighted to have this opportunity to share with the community at large the great, amazing work that our local chapters are doing for Canadians with celiac disease. And Manitoba has been a very, very active chapter for many years. And Christa, just really like to get everyone to get to know you and your journey with celiac disease. So tell us a little bit about your journey, and then maybe how you discovered the CCA and why you decided to get involved. And I know it could be a long conversation, but I think it's really important for people to hear that inspiration and why you kind of leaned in as well.
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity. So my journey started with celiac disease in 2014. So it's almost an anniversary for me, July 12th, 2014. I know we're doing this, and so you'll be seeing this later, but it's pretty exciting for me to be coming up to that important date because it really did change my life. Previous to that, I'd known I had celiac. So I had something wrong with me my whole entire life, but I was in the middle of my PhD project and I wasn't feeling right and I was struggling. And for what it was worth, I wasn't achieving the way that I felt I should, and my body started shutting down. I was actually tracking grizzly bears in Alberta and I was not feeling right. And I was in a camp where I was working, and they were eating granola and all of those whole wheats, and I was getting sicker and sicker, not feeling right. And so I came back to Manitoba. I live in northern Manitoba, so my doctor and we had a really good relationship, and I said to her, I'm not feeling right. And so she sent me for every test and couldn't figure out. She knew I wasn't feeling well and said to me, I don't know what this is. And so she kept testing me. And finally, it was May 2014. I wasn't feeling right and I was having trouble getting out of bed. Depression was creeping into my life really, really badly. And I had the news on, and they were talking about Celiac Awareness Month. And I was like, what? And it was the correlation with the thyroid. And so I had a thyroid issue. And so I started looking this up and Dr. Google, and was like, I have that. I started checking boxes. And there were tests online, and it's like, if you have this, consult your doctor. So I went to the doctor, and I don't fit the typical profile. I'm a pretty sturdy girl outside of Zoom, and I don't fit the typical profile of being like this. And I was gaining weight and not being able to lose despite trying all the things that I was trying. And my doctor said, yeah, are you regular? And I was like, well, I'm regular, same time every day. But I wasn't. After I got diagnosed, she was a little bit in shock that I was fitting the profile. And then I was a part of it. And then I come to find out that 1 in 3 couldn't lose weight. And that was me my whole life. And I had I had some things that I found out, oh, that's celiac too. So I went gluten-free, as many people do. I had the biopsy, so I was trying to push through my PhD while trying to come out of the horrendous brain fog that I had. And it was really hard when you're trying to, do research to try to read through a paper and retain it. And I just wasn't doing that. So it was a slog. I took some time off and came back and forth. And then towards the end, there were some other family issues. So I had to pull from my PhD, which was hard, but I always feel like I got my degree in celiac disease. So I tell people I finished my PhD in celiac disease. So in 2014, it wasn't until December that I went to it was actually in consultation with one of the great Manitoba supporters of those living with celiac disease. It was Lyle Myers at Myers Drugs, because I went there and they had a bunch of food. So I was there talking with him. He was an old family friend, and he said, you should go to a meeting, because I happened to be down in Winnipeg that weekend, and there was a meeting, and I went to my first gluten-free 101. And it just confirmed for me, because I do have a science background. So it did confirm for me I was on the right path. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this right. I can climb out of this hole, because it was a struggle. And I thought, how do people do this if they don't have the background to filter out all the garbage that's out there, right? And so the Celiac Association for me gave me confirmation that, science, peer reviewed, all the things that I had been, studying as a student, it confirmed all that for me. And it was like, okay, this is really good. So I started reaching out a little bit more, as I was pretty anxiety ridden. So I wasn't very social, and I still am not. So Zoom I love. But with I started reaching out and looking for support online, and I found the Facebook group, and then the CCA Facebook group. And from there, I realized that there was a conference in 2015 in Winnipeg, and I made a point of going in June. And that for me was amazing, that I could go, and I found the community, and I didn't have to explain to anybody, and I didn't socialize, but I was just with, I think there was 200 people or 250 people
Like you.
when they were ready to open up the gluten-free food expo that was adjoined in the room after they had some presentations. It was introduced as, okay, we all know you want to go out there and it's all about the food. And I was like, okay. So there were local vendors there, and I came home with my goodie bag of stuff. And I lingered around that place until it closed, because I was like, there were so many, because again, anxiety, there were so many large crowds of people wandering. I waited until people started to disperse and then went up. And one of the vendors gave me a bag of cut bread samples, and I came home, sat with butter and a knife. And so I was like, I found community, I found support, I found my way. And then I just kind of kept in contact through Facebook, the people that I'd met that I recognized from the Facebook group, and I would message them. But in reality, my first experience with meeting anyone with celiac disease was in Alberta. So I have friends that I call them the celiac underground now, with things that I still can't get in Manitoba. I'm like, are you coming to Manitoba? Can you bring me pizzas? Or, right, there's certain things, certain products, and you can find your way. And that was it for me. It was finding my way. And then my involvement with the chapter, I had mentioned offhand that I was interested. I was sitting on another board, and I was looking at stepping down from that board and perhaps stepping into the Manitoba Chapter board and helping with the newsletter. And I got a phone call in 2019 in early January, and they asked if I would be willing to step in as president. And
That's a big leap from,
it was a little, yeah, and I hadn't been involved in the board, so I was, but I did have board experience, so it wasn't that
exactly. It wasn't that you were unfamiliar yet with that,
yeah, and
the skill.
And this was near and dear to my heart. So in terms of family members and things like that, I'm the only one that popped up with having celiac disease. But in looking back now, I know my father had it. My father passed away at 61. He had a whole gamut of symptoms, and the doctors kept on prescribing medication, not looking for the underlying cause. And he was misdiagnosed and and so looking back, also my grandmother, his mom, same thing. And then it wasn't until my gluten-free 101 where was Lyle Myers, who came in and said, okay, who here has the rash? He wasn't doing the gluten-free 101. It was Heather Yu at that point. But I said, rash? There's a rash with this? Because all my life I had had sensitive skin. And my dad, same thing. And so looking back, we thought it was poison ivy. No. And so it was an interesting journey. My grandmother had it, like we all had the skin issue. And so it impacted our brain. And so we weren't the typical celiac family where it's, failure to thrive. And we were big people starving is how I explain it. We were,
wow. Yeah. That's incredible.
Hardy Ukrainians. And we were, starving for food. And so it's hard because we were so nutritionally deprived, but you wouldn't know what to look at us because she looks healthy. And so it was a little bit, it was an interesting journey, especially in 2015 when I was at the conference and I stood up. I'm 5'9.5", and I stood up and I was like, holy smokes, I feel very tall.
Well, that's incredible. And just the more stories we learn and we talk to the different chapters, like everyone has these incredible journeys. A lot of people are just like, oh, my journey is boring, or no, because the more you talk about your story, I'm the tall, robust, person.
I'm a curvy girl. I say to people, The
It could
fact
be,
of
it still
starting.
could be celiac. And I think the more stories we share, the more journeys, and even I think just, talking about, your shyness but here you are putting yourself out there as a president, you're doing all this amazing work. And you're just the empowerment, you sort of exude that confidence, and you've advocated for yourself, you've learned, you've found community, and that's amazing. And just that has helped improve a life, which is amazing. And now you're sharing your journey, and hopefully that can happen with other people in Manitoba, because you're like, I've been there, I'm here to support you, which is really amazing that you've decided to give back and take the skills that you have, the research, the science, obviously a strong writer because of, your PhD work and all the reports that you've had to do, that you're sharing this skill with us as a community, we're very grateful, because that's, we are a volunteer-based organization, and we truly do need, the people are what makes the difference, right? So.
Yeah, and then to add to it all, I work at a university. I teach, and so for myself, it was a real easy to be able to explain this to people in a way that it's still, not dumbing down the science, but explain it in a way that it's accessible to people, so that they don't have that struggle. And so it's been a really rewarding experience working with the community, and making sure that the community remains. We've been 40 years in Manitoba. We had our 40th
Wow.
last year, and so there have been some. We put together a cookbook, a virtual electronic form of a cookbook, and it was amazing. It had the history of our chapter in there, and it was founded to support children, and that was the original intent. And we're doing some strategic planning right now too, because we finished our bylaw update, mirroring what national has done, and now we're looking to figure out what our goals are, because we've got lots of pots on the stove or iron in the fire.
Yeah. And I
So
think it's so important that, for national, we have the national issues, the national tone, and then hopefully chapters will be able to help with some of those local things that kind of come down. I mean, we all have the same kind of main issues, but we just have to fight them at sort of and advocate them at a maybe different level. For national, it's regulations, whatever, but locally, it's some programming or particular services, down to the individual, that grassroots level. So just speaking of like, helping out and leaning in and using that experience and helping people locally. I just want to let people hear about the work that you've done for the Manitoba Harvest and the food banks. I know a lot of people will know, or some people will know about the Save Me for Gluten Free, where we're trying to get individuals across Canada to make donations to their local food banks that are on our list, or to maybe even be an ambassador for like a regional food bank, and get in there and use your expertise of reading labels to help set up the gluten-free, aisles or section. But you guys just really leaned in at just a whole different level in Manitoba to support people with celiac disease who have food insecurity.
yeah, sure thing. Well, with the pandemic, we can just to let you know, we continued to do our support meetings. So we have 4 support meetings a year. And because I'm pretty Zoom savvy from instructing up north, it wasn't a hard thing to do for us. It was getting speakers. We had speakers from other locations that really opened the door for us and we also did some speakers that were local businesses, so that we had them come in and we interviewed them about what sort of supports they have, because people weren't going out the same way. And
Yeah.
we our gluten-free 101 that we actually tried to move to have it be Manitoba wide. And so with the pandemic, we had assumed that Harvest Manitoba, which is our overarching food distributor for food banks in Manitoba. So what food banks do is they register with Harvest Manitoba people. So it might be a church, it might be a community center, and what they'll do is they'll register and they will tell how many people are coming into their food bank, and they will have the food sent out from that distribution center. And with COVID, they started packing hampers. And we came to find out, because we had raised some money, and we normally were going to give some of our money to Harvest to purchase food, and then we realized that they weren't sorting for gluten free at all. And so it became pretty easy for us the way it was situated, in that we have one local place where everything goes, rather than so we can reach all food banks, we started to try to find out what the numbers were and how many hampers we would have to pack. And we were planning on, I have a place in Winnipeg, doing it maybe in my garage in Winnipeg, because we weren't, people needed food. And we started with 120 hampers. And what we did was we reached out to community to ask for funds rather than because they weren't sorting. So anything that even was marked Save Me for Gluten Free, they were putting it into the common pool. And
You
so
needed a local solution to Manitoba where, in different food banks in Ontario, they work individually and they sort, and then some of them are depots. So yeah, it's like working with the Second Harvest to get it out to different groups. So yeah, you had to come up with a Manitoba solution, which is important.
and for us, our Crystal Celiac. So our contact at Harvest Manitoba also had Mika Peterson. She was amazing in us meeting up with her, and she has celiac disease herself. So she understood the need for this. And so we started with 120 kits. It cost us, we started raising funds for it too. So we took the money that we had originally allocated and we bought food. And we reached out to distributors and tried to get things at a discount. And it seemed to work. It cost us about $11 a kit. And we did 120 to start, and we've dropped it down because we're doing it a little bit more often now. So we've got, we do 75 or 80 hampers every second month rather than every 4 months. And so that the food is fresh, and we know that we've got freezer space. So if anyone wants to make take stuff off and drop it, or take stuff and drop it at Harvest, if they want to do loaves of bread, they'll take it and put it in the freezer. So it's
You're
really
like a mini food bank within a food bank, and sometimes that has to happen. And I think that's a great, you found a great local solution. And that's so great that the food bank, obviously with that personal connection, sees the need. And that's amazing. And that's so many families that, and just as we continue now with the rising cost of food prices, it hasn't ended with COVID. And knowing that you have a nice system, sounds like you've got a team of volunteers, you've got the generous, vendor supplier community that has leaned in. And it's nice because it's just not random. It's now a system. You've got a sort of a system kind of going on. Which is great. And I don't know, Christa, do you need any more volunteers while we're talking to people? Or
we always need volunteers. So most certainly we put the call out, and for our hamper packings, it usually runs about 2 hours, and it's done in the evenings. And we usually have, the quicker it goes with more hands. And so we usually ask for between 8 and 12 people to join. And our last hamper packing, it took us, Mika was there, and she's like, I can't get over how quickly you guys are doing this now. And so it was great to see, but that would be ideal if we could have that. And so they can reach out to the chapter and be put on our volunteer list. We've now got a formal volunteer list that we're moving back to, because with the pandemic, we kind of let things sort of slide because we weren't meeting in person. And also, just to kind of talk about leaning in, I was like, we didn't buy some of this food. And she said, now that grocery stores know that we're collecting for gluten-free, they're designating, they're sending specific gluten-free marked for the hampers for us, so that
wonderful.
Our money's going a little bit further, because exactly what you said, the cost of food, we've noticed that there's been shortages too. And we're, in that grain region where we should be able to access oats and have that. We're finding that the store shelves are not as plentiful, and the price is definitely $2 to $3 more. And so
and speaking to oats, and we've had that conversation offline before, and we've been talking about it since last fall, the challenges of the crops, now with the issues in Ukraine, but just specifically in Canada, weather, supply, the popularity of oat products. So sometimes, they're not, as many kind of gluten-free. This is going to be a bit of a challenge in CCA. That's where nationally we're trying to have that kind of bigger picture. But locally, you're seeing it happen to the individual. So it's all that different perspective. And that's why we just love those regular chapter meetings that we have led by Elizabeth Wall, just because we can hear all the issues that come forward, and then, like, what do we need to do collectively at that national level to kind of address issues, or just sharing ideas. Like, I think just you've been a great share of knowledge that then maybe inspires another chapter to look at what's happening, or here's a way we've done it, maybe you could try adopting. So it's amazing. And I just even know, as you mentioned, Ukrainian, you guys have been, and this is where the collaboration kind of comes in, is we reached out to you, knowing that you've got a rich Ukrainian community, and some relatives,
Yep.
to help us create some additional resources for that Save Me for Gluten Free, where we've kind of created a bilingual sheet with the English and the Ukrainian to help those maybe refugees that are celiac. There won't be a lot of them, but there'll be some that, we hope they'll find way to your supports, but they may be relying on the Manitoba Harvest to help them.
Well, we've had between 700 and 800 refugees already arrive in Manitoba. And through you reaching out, I reached out with our refugee task force with the province and provided them with the translations that really great infographic. So with that, there should be at least 8. So odds are there's 8 of them that of the 700 or 800 that are celiac but if it comes as a family too, there may be more than that. So it does run in families, and so that's where it'll be interesting to see if anyone does reach out to us. We've had a couple people volunteer to help with that also. So when I put the call out saying that this might be happening, that because my relatives, they're directly from the Ukraine, and it was a bit of a struggle when the war was starting, that their headspace wasn't quite there, so I needed some backup. So it has been a definite learning experience. And I think I provided you with how we got that information to our government for refugee. And so that task force, so I don't know if other provinces are using a refugee task force to deal with newcomers coming in, but that for us, they have a list of resources for individuals. So if they have a question, they can reach out for their support. So we're trying to make sure that they're supported in the province.
For sure. So if there's someone watching this and they're not as familiar, which I'd be surprised if they're from Manitoba, you've mentioned the GF 101s and the availability. This is the great thing with Zoom. You can reach more people. We found the same thing nationally, where people fall through the cracks sort of nationally. But what are some of the kind of things that you do at Manitoba that supports the community? If someone's sort of newly diagnosed, or maybe they've been celiac, but they're thinking, oh, maybe I could help, or just learn more.
So we have our local gluten-free 101s that run, and pre-pandemic they were run through Manitoba Possible, which previously was the Society for Manitoba with Disabilities. Manitoba Possible provides us the space, and that's where our office space is also. And we shifted because I live in Thompson, which is 8 hours north of Winnipeg. And I said, if we're going to have meetings, we're going to have to do this by Zoom. And so this was pre-pandemic, so 2019 onwards. And then we started moving in February 2019. We had our first Zoomed gluten-free 101. So we were getting into the Zoom thing before. We like to think that we're trendsetters. And so we still are doing that every second month. We've had a shift on our board, and our peer coordinator, counseling and coordinator, is now Shelley Timlick. And so we had Joy Plowman step down, and Shelley has stepped in. So she's been a great supporter of the community, and had a child with celiac. And she recently did a news report, interviewed for the CTV morning live show here in Manitoba, talking about living with a child with celiac disease. And we also have our Celiac Month awareness events. So we have our Shine the Light on Celiac events. We have our legislative building lit up green, and we have the Winnipeg sign lit up green, and we try to tie in a food drive with that. And this year we had a giant celiac ribbon, which was kind of neat. We were planning to do this pre-pandemic, and then just to have people kind of, when we were able to gather, we thought, okay, we'll put this ribbon down and we'll have people join in. And then the pandemic happened and they were acknowledging the healthcare workers in the province. So our Shine the Light event got canceled, but that's totally fine. We were okay with that. But then we thought, even if we're not gathering, we would be able to have something that showed that brought awareness. So the big ribbon we laid out this year, and we had some people come and help with that, and it was wonderful. And we're hoping that, as we're able to gather more, we'll have more events like that and have our big ribbon there. So tied with that, we also have our yearly walkathon. And our walkathon, so aside from our Zoom support meetings that we have 4 of during the year, we also have our walkathon, which is our big fundraiser for the year. We have it at Assiniboine Park, which is centrally located, sort of, in the city of Winnipeg. And we have a barbecue usually tied with it. And so this year we had to pivot. It was our first in-person event. We asked people to sign up. Normally we just say, come. But this year we wanted to make sure that, we had a list of people just in case things kind of went off the rails, with COVID changes. And we had about 25 people come, and we had a barbecue with, we had some donors for our event. So Manitoba Pork again provided our lunch jar, provided us with the bun. We had it was wonderful. It was a great lunch, but we did it as a grab and go. So we had pre-lunch packages rather than have. So it was great, and it was, like I said, well attended, and the numbers
And
are
that's just a different way for people to get involved if they don't think they could be president of the chapter, or they don't feel confident that they could be like a peer, to lead a session. Just coming out and just being there and saying, I'm out here walking to show my support. It just, all those little small ways just build and support community and support themselves as well.
Well, it brings awareness. And so even holding on to the ribbon, we thought that would be a great thing for kids to want to be able to hold on to this giant part of that.
And meet other kids. Yeah.
And meet other kids. And we're really trying to have and again, this is part of our strategic planning that we're doing over summer 2022. I can't believe I'm saying that, but we're trying to figure out what our focus is, because we have, like I said, a lot of things going on and what our priorities are. And we are looking at trying to have more kid supports in the province also, because that is a real struggle. Because when you are a parent trying to find your way for your child that is ill, you want to, have them be able to associate and not feel ostracized. So
and we're seeing the national, like, how is it developing supports? We've got the Growing Up Celiac resource. We've been talking to Alberta, and maybe there's funding for like a companion piece for the children. So we've got the workbook for families, but maybe then the only challenge with that is how do you get the right age group, right? Because you've got, a learning level, reading level. So it's just, as we all work together, I think, it's learning, just being there for the families. And so it's great to have that local support, get them connected with other local kids, local camps, local, just dealing with things in your local schools. And then, just those overall resources. So it's so great that you're helping those families.
We've had incredible support from the community, young and old. We had 2 little girls who had gotten diagnosed. One had gotten diagnosed, I think, 4 years ago, and then her best friend ended up getting diagnosed. And
wow.
We did a donation drive this past Christmas for Harvest hampers, and they raised almost $1,000 between the 2 of them for hampers. Or over $1,000. No, almost $1,000. And so it was incredible. And so I'm like, I feel good that I know that the future of the association in Manitoba is in safe hands with young folk like that, really trying to make a difference within the community, because that is unbelievable. When the mom reached out to me, and it made me feel, like I said, that I'm in the right place doing the right, it's my people. Right. That's
that's amazing.
I'm in the right community, because it is so hard for some people to be able to find their way. And the feedback that we've heard from the hamper program is that there are, when people open the box, they can't get over the food that's in there, because they do get a bag of oats, they get a box of pancake mix, and it's each person that's in the family that is celiac.
It's thoughtfully curated for them, which is amazing. And I understand, with food banks, some operate differently. Some allow people to come in and shop, but with COVID, they were sort of packaged up and here's your bag, and now you're sort of bundling it them regardless, but it's thoughtfully curated so that they can get maybe the nutrition they need, the basics, the breakfast, some lunch, something for dinner, and that's so important. And your people need to know that when they do donate to CCA, whether it's the local chapter or nationally, they're changing lives. We're not a big cumbersome organization. We're very small, we're very nimble, very flexible, adaptable to the conditions. And when the pandemic hit, we're literally changing lives as we know that the issues come up, and your dollars aren't wasted on giant administration. It's going to help people and make a difference in that phone call, the support from a dietitian, local peer supporter, that local hamper. It's making just a real big difference. And I think I get the chills when I think about all the great work that's happening across Canada at our local chapters.
The local stories that come back. We had a teacher reach out from an adult ed center with a student who had come back to do mature student who had just gotten diagnosed, and reached out to us about the food, gluten-free food, because they had no idea where to find it. And it was really great for us to be able to say, you can go safely to the food bank as long as you request for the box. You'll get the box in addition to. And so in Manitoba, they are moving back to that shopping model. But our plan is to still continue to put that hamper at least until they're able to work at full capacity and have their volunteers, because their volunteers at Harvest, there's still everyone's scrambling now for volunteers because people have kind of gotten out of the routine of it. And so Harvest is having a hard time. When we were there doing our last hamper packing, when we finished so early, we were asking, if some of the people in the group were asking, do you need any more help? Because we're here, we can, put boxes together or do something for you because we're here in a, eager set of hands. And it's building that community even outside of
the celiac community. You're helping the greater community. So that's amazing. Well, Christa, is there anything before we head off, and is there anything you'd like to let people know about? It sounds like you're doing some strategic planning. You're looking ahead to some amazing.
We're always looking for potential board members and individuals to volunteer. We're always keeping that volunteer list up to date. So if you do have time, and it can be at any level, if you want to just come and help set up tables and chairs if we have another in-person meeting, or help with our walkathon once a year, or help with the hamper packing, please reach out. And we are always, like I said, looking for potential board members, because there is a point where I'm going to have to, hand the keys to someone else to drive the car. So,
and that's healthy. That's healthy to have that transition. And to always be bringing people in and through, because as you said about the future, it keeps it vibrant and brings new ideas. I mean, people have always some wonderful ideas. I know I don't know it all, and I learned so much from you all across Canada. I'm sure there's lots of people that just can just give those hours. I think it's just setting expectations. Like, this is sort of like what hours we do. This is sort of what's required. And I think, Christa, you've been really great about letting people know that. So I'm sure you're very reachable, just to kind of explain, to someone who's interested, what's involved,
Most certainly. And we have moved away. I will stress, we have moved away from the paid feed membership model. And that has been really incredible also, so that we provide our newsletter. All they have to do is sign up for our newsletter, and they can get our newsletter. We have a social media presence now, much stronger than we once had. And so that for us is really, again, increasing that community and awareness throughout Manitoba, which I think is important.
And there may be people out there who are really savvy with social media who could be a great help, and just creating, maybe they've got a little bit of design experience and they can help put a few posts together, or they've got some event experience and can be out there. Just even if you don't have event experience, like for your run, being at a table and just signing people in. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. You don't, it's just a hand, as you said, there's just, sometimes it's that extra body there that just is greeting people. That's makes all the difference.
And I know that this is going to have a later play date, but we are still looking for like I said, we just had our peer support person replaced, which is great, but we're still looking for a VP. And for our VP, it's grant proposal writing, and we don't need
Okay.
someone that has that experience. We'll provide the training with that. And so if
Well, if you
someone,
find someone, send them over our way too, because we're grant. If
I know that
anybody
that's,
knows, grants take a lot of time and a lot of commitment, and sometimes they can take an entire day. But if you've got someone dedicated who doesn't mind just putting the pieces together and just getting them in, that's half the battle. Is just if you've got it already, you just need someone to pull it off, fill out the app, and get it out there. So
exactly. And that's one of our priorities, because that we found is there's a lot in terms of community support within the
there's a
province.
lot of money on the table that goes untapped, especially locally. Yeah.
And so again, if we can tap into some of that and provide more support for Manitobans living with celiac disease, I'm all for it.
Okay. All right. So we both put the call out. Anybody who's interested in grant writing or just is really good at, putting proposals together, call us, right?
Yes. Well, that's where I would
Call
be
us
like,
both.
well, if anyone has, grad school experience, because that's part of your grad school training. That for me,
Ah,
yeah. And so that's where we can assist in Manitoba. And I know that National has some assistance too. There's some supports nationally that we can tap into from other chapters to get some help with that, because I know that it's been very helpful in the supports that we provide, that you provide us, that we can provide locally.
yeah.
It's
Yeah. It's a team effort. It's it's that constant communication, constant learning between us all, and just together, and just, we've been saying since, the 5 years, just, one individual can only sort of do much together. I think hopefully we've shown today what a big difference you can make just by being a part of a group effort, even if it's just, coming out and walking in an event. Same with the national kind of event. It does truly make a big difference, and you are changing lives. And so thank you, Christa, for all that you do. Thank you for finding us, and leaning in and sharing your expertise, your science, your expertise with us, and just your passion. You're just such a passionate individual who cares so much, and you're really truly, all of you, making a great difference in Manitoba. So thanks for joining. And just maybe, is there an email in case people are interested in reaching out about anything we've talked about today? Is there info at Manitoba or?
Yes, there is. So just give me one moment to make sure I've got it. It is, oh boy.
Put you on the spot here.
Put me on the spot here. So one moment here, I've got to make sure I've got the right email.
And I know people can email us at info@celiac.ca and just say, looking for a Manitoba contact, but
it is Manitoba CCA chapter at gmail.com.
there you go.
And I'd like to thank you, Melissa, and invite you to come talk to us in Manitoba about all the things that are going on nationally. Because
always happy to do that.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see you in the fall.
I hope so too. All right. Well, thanks again. And thanks for joining us on another In Conversation and Chapter Check-In. So have a great summer. I know this is coming out probably in the fall, but thank you again, and look forward to hearing more about what's the exciting things from Manitoba.
Thank you.
Take care.